promises to begin a regular uploading schedule, then yeets off to who knows where for an unfortunate number of months. Why am I this predictable? Well, welcome back, and I'm done making idle promises. I have no idea when I'll be getting out the next video, but for now I hope you enjoyed this one. Today we are taking a look at one of my old favorites, something I haven't watched for half a decade. Welcome, welcome one and all, this is Coriander Stone, and today, Legend of the Legendary Heroes. For starters, just so nobody gets confused, the Legend of the Legendary Heroes has nothing to do with the heroic legend of Arslan, and especially nothing to do with the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Even though it has two protagonists, the plotline split between one, a lazy and sarcastic character known as the greatest magician in his country, and who is a lover of books, naps, and especially history, and two, a young and idealistic noble bastard who's rising up the ranks of his homeland in hopes to take it over and change it at whatever cost. Yeah, no, this has nothing to do with the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Even when that said noble bastard, now king, walks into his study with his red-headed second command at his back to find a dark and ominous manipulative character standing there waiting to try to pledge his service, but who won't speak freely until said overthrower of the nobility sends said red-headed second-in-command out of the room. Yeah, this is nothing like the Legend of the Galactic Heroes. Note to self, I really need to work on that influenced by the Legend of the Galactic Heroes video, but putting a bookmark in that for now. Looking at the story on its own merits because it really deserves to be judged on it and not by the fact that it was obviously borrowing some things from the greatest anime of all time, or at least one of the greatest animes of all time. Anyway, Legend of the ridiculously large number of legends in the title is a fantasy series set in the kingdom of Roland. Our main protagonist is Reiner Lute, an incredibly powerful magician known as the Black-Haired Devil, even though he's animated with brown hair, but don't think too hard about that. Reiner has the very unfortunate distinction of working alongside Swordmaster, Dongo Lover, and General Sadist, where Reiner is concerned, Ferris Eris, and working for the hero king of Roland himself, Sian Istal. This is all very unfortunate for Reiner because Reiner prefers naps and great in unending quantities and basically nothing else. At the moment, however, Reiner is deprived of his naps by Sion, who is sending him off into the world to search for things known as Heroes' Relics. Heroes' Relics are incredibly powerful pieces of magic left over from a bygone era in which great heroes fought demons for the very fate of the world. Sion's idea, or rather Reiner's idea that Sion is acting on, is that if you could dig up bygone pieces of that forgotten age, pull out some of these hero relics, you could use them to create peace in all of not just Roland, but the entire continent, using their magic to create a scenario that would basically resemble the Cold War's MAD situation. Reiner also has the very unfortunate distinction of being the Alpha Stigma. Alpha Stigma are a sort of magic eyes. There are actually multiple sorts, but you'll get into those after the halfway mark of the series, so I'm not really going to go into it for now. What I will say though is the Alpha Stigma is the most traditional of these, and it allows its bearer to analyze any magic around it, to see through it, to overpower it, to rewrite it, and to learn and copy it instantly. It's an incredibly powerful and handy gift, but there is a catch. The Alpha Stigma is also a sort of curse. When an Alpha Stigma crosses certain emotional lines, they lose control, handing over their body to a sort of dark force within, and going on a rampage, tearing the world apart until someone stops them or they destroy everything in their path. For this reason, Alpha Stigma are shunned and killed wherever they go, as monsters waiting to happen. While half the screen time follows Reiner and Ferris on their quest, the other half belongs to our other protagonist, Sian Istal. Sion, Hero King of Roland, is a much darker figure than his nap-obsessed counterpart. Throughout the series, he is torn constantly between the need to be absolutely ruthless in order to take down the nobles who do so many horrible things to the populace of Roland, and his own better angels. It's a struggle that's made manifest in his dealings with one Mirren Froed, the not Paul von Oberstein of the series, that is to say, a dark and sinister noble who's come to serve under Sion of his own will. Froed is absolutely bent on taking down all of those who stand in Sion's way in the most manipulative ways possible, often inciting rebellions just so he has an opportunity to crush them. Sion's handling of him therefore becomes a reflection of Sion's character as well, as he is torn between giving Mirren the free rein he needs to get his work done, while also protecting the lives that he would otherwise throw away. Basically what it boils down to is Sion's side of the story is a much darker and more intense military and political drama, while Reiner's part is filled with supernatural fights and general questing hijinks. Tone-wise, the series strikes a rather interesting and unusual but nonetheless very successful balance. Much of it is dark, bloody, and graphic, with scenes of eyeballs being punched out by magical forces showering the screen in arterial spray. The nobles of the land are horrific monsters, and you get to see up close and personal what they have done to society and specifically to our main characters. Neither Reiner nor Sion have had an easy path, and let's just say that the traumas and horrors they go through are not all left behind in backstory. That said, this is not a dark show for the most part. It is absolutely filled to bursting, at least in the first half, with anime comedy and hijinks, some of which is hilarious. Sion and Reiner are the two best parts of the show, and getting them on the same scene when their narrative paths cross is always a treat. Typically they are teasing and insulting each other, and throwing around the sort of anime hijinks you just can't help but laugh at.
I wondered why, day after day, it continually sucks to be me.
In full disclosure, I know exactly what you mean.
But then, it came to me. It's him. He's to blame. That arrogant, diabolical king of the Roland Empire, Sion Astal! It's his fault, my lord!
So you're admitting you tried to kill me? With a book?
With a book.
Your epiphany led you to believe you should try to assassinate your king with a piece of literature.
It's blowing your mind, isn't it?
That said, while a lot of the comedy in this show hits home, a lot of it also kind of fails to land. There's one particular set of running jokes which is honestly just not funny. I guess it's sort of a reverse on so many cliche fan service gags, in that rather than the main character being a pervert, creep, or anything, the gag here is that Ferris constantly accuses him of being a pervert, creep, and sleeping with and seducing tons of women when Reiner only wants to seduce a nap. Now occasionally these jokes do land. In all fairness, there are some legitimately funny scenes to be gotten out of it, but there are also a lot of times when they, well, don't. It's just not funny, and it kind of gets annoying pretty fast. But that said, do not let these jokes turn you off the series, because honestly, there is so much else here, both in terms of really strong and hilarious comedy, and also much darker and more complicated plot-driven narrative. That said, while Legend of the Whatevers' main characters are absolutely the single best part of the show, with both Sion and Reiner being incredibly well written and Reiner easily making my top 10 protagonists of all time list, a lot of the other major characters are rather lackluster and actively annoying. Milk Claude and her taboo breaker squad is frankly quite annoying, Milk herself especially so until a couple of scenes near the end. While Iris, Ferris's younger sister, is literally just annoying every time she shows up on screen. But while there are a few characters who you really don't care for, at least I didn't care for, and who I think were more cliche than character, again, the main cast totally makes up with it, with Reiner and Sion being absolutely phenomenal, and when she's not making those jokes, Ferris is also a spectacular character, and her obsession with the Fandango is also quite amusing. While the relationship between Reiner and Sion is absolutely the center point of the narrative, the relationship between Reiner and Ferris is also incredibly strong, well developed, and really, really heartfelt when the story gets right down to it. And then of course watching the two of them come together to mutually plot Sion's demise for making them work is also always highly amusing.
So, what methods of torture shall we use before we kill him?
Fair question. How about we steal something precious to him? No, not my precious thing! I can't take it anymore! Flop!
And while I do have my complaints about the secondary cast, it also has a large number of really good characters like Clow Klom, one of Roland's commanders, along with Kiefer Knowles, an old friend of Sion and Reiner from school, and several members of the enemy nation of Gestark, as well as a couple of other magic eye-bearers who you meet later on. One other thing I have to really commend this series for is its lore. Legend of the, has an incredibly strong and complicated network of plot points all built around a unique history that is truly creative and makes full use of the world and characters. The lore, which begins as the premise, goes on to have real meaning to the characters and the way their lives unfold in ways that I found incredibly fascinating. In terms of animation and sound, the animation is, well, it's good. It's fun, it's colorful, it's enjoyable, it's entertaining. There are 1 or 2 episodes where you can see the budget slipping. It was actually pretty funny to see since all of the NPCs turned into soft, flatly rendered figures while Reiner was still fully rendered in the same art style as the rest of the series. But with those 2 episodes aside, the animation is consistent, bright, and fun throughout. Or dark and disturbing when it needs to be, and it is very good at dark and disturbing, and there are many times when it needs to be. Sound-wise, while none of the soundtrack songs really stood out to me, both OPs are excellent, capturing the tones of their specific halves of the series. The first OP, Lament, is bright, fun, and full of promise. While the second opening, Last Inferno, captures the much more dark and serious tone of the second half, as well as the pain all of the main characters are going through during it. Because make no mistake, while this is a show that begins in comedy, it does not end there. And this is a series that knows what the word feels truly means. That said, even in its darkest moments, it never forgets about its comedic beginnings. The second to last episode, for example, is a perfect melding of the two, showing us so much of the comedy and lighthearted antics and character dynamics that we've grown to love, while also using that to make the dark tragedy all the more stark and painful. It's really a masterpiece of writing in that regard. To sum up, while Legendary Naptime has its flaws, it's overall a highly entertaining and often emotional story with great characters and a good amount of comedy and action to go with its darker themes. Overall, I give this show a rating of 4 out of a possible 5 stars. For alternate anime recommendations, my first rec of course goes to Legend of the Galactic, the space one, for a more serious look at many of the same themes and conflicts, in a, space setting instead of this fantasy one. If you're looking to keep the fantasy setting and looking for something else with strong world building and the same sort of political maneuvering and military contriving, together with a fun, strong character cast and a nice amount of comedy, I point you toward The Heroic Legend of Arslan. And finally, if you're looking for another story about a fantasy-esque world led by a duo, one of which being a lazy historical genius and the other a expert swordswoman, I point you toward none other than Alderamin on the Sky. That's all from me for now. I'll try to post another video in not too long in future. We'll see. Hopefully. For now though, this is Coriander Stone, and I thank you for watching. El Sai Kangru.